What is going on? It's Haran, yes, and I'm back with a continuation video. This video is an actual continuation part 2 of my previous video that covered setting up your API with OpenAI. Okay, so we connected to OpenAI using our API, and in that class we covered how to get your API key from platform.openai and use Postman to make a request to multiple endpoints on OpenAI. So this class is a continuation of that, so you can move away from Postman and actually put that into a web application. But to do that, you will need to know how to create a web application or a mobile application. But in this class, we'll be covering a web application. So to start out, I'm going to start outside of my IDE, okay? My IDE is just my development environment that I'll be using to write my code, but I'm going to start outside of it because I want to kind of pre-make my folder structure that I'll be using. Okay, and folder structures is something that you will be using in any development project that you have. You just have folders to separate your code so you know where things are and keep your code a lot more organized. So let's go ahead and start creating our project outside of our IDE. And the reason why we do that sometimes as well is because sometimes we pull other projects in and then we'll have to open that project in the IDE. So let's go ahead and start creating our folders so we can start opening that in our IDE and start going ahead and creating what we need to create. All right, so first things first, we're going to call this project Philanthropy. We're going to call this project Philanthropy. All right, so right here we go ahead and we are going to then open our Philanthropy folder. Before we do that, let's rename the folder and make sure we call it into Philanthropy. Okay, so let's rename this to Philanthropy. So Philanthropy, right? So now we have Philanthropy. Let's open our Philanthropy folder. In that folder, we're going to create two folders. One is going to be called in the CSS folder, and then the other folder is going to be the JavaScript folder. All right, so we're going to have a CSS folder and a JavaScript folder. The JavaScript folder will have all our JavaScript file that we'll be using in our web application, and we will need that for the next class. The CSS folder will have all our style sheets in there. This is where we're going to put anything that we use to make the page look all pretty. We're going to then pull that in into our HTML file. So to do that, we can create new files here, but unfortunately I'm on a Mac. So to create a new file, I would have to probably go into terminal. So to do that, let's just open our project in a new IDE. Like, so your IDE is Sublime. What I like my IDE PHP Storm because I create a lot of PHP projects. So it doesn't matter what IDE you use, you just have to know how to use that IDE. So make sure you watch some videos and get an understanding of your IDE. Okay, so I'm gonna go on my IDE, which is PHP Storm. So let me go in PHP Storm, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a project. Okay, I'm going to open a project. So let me go ahead and open my project here. So my project is in my documents, and then it's in my development class, right? So Philanthropy. So I'm going to open that. Okay, so now I open that project here. Now it's open. Now let's go ahead and let's start creating our files that we'll be using in our website. So the first file we'll be using is the main file of any website, which is our index file. This is where the web browser knows, like, hey, listen, when I open up, it's more than likely will go to this page. So this is kind of your base file or your home page. Your index page is basically your home page, and this is what your server will be pointing to when someone comes to your site. So most sites use an index page, and so we're going to stay with that same format. So I'm going to name this index. Okay, now if you have a IDE that does not know that this is an HTML file, you may have to put .html so it knows the file type. Okay, you may have to put a .html extension so it knows the file type. My IDE, however, knows that this is an HTML file, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove that. All right, so let's go ahead. So now I have the index file. Now let's go ahead and create two more files in the JavaScript folder. I'm going to click on the JavaScript folder. I'm going to right click on my JavaScript folder, and I'm going to create a new file. So in your JavaScript folder, you want to create a new file. So the new file that I'll be creating here is a JavaScript file, because that JS folder stands for JavaScript. We're going to be putting our JavaScript file in there. So again, I'm going to call this, but I'm going to call this base. Okay, I'm just going to call it base, and again, this will know that because I selected a JavaScript file, it will know that it's a base JavaScript file. If your IDE again does not know that this is a JavaScript file, you need to put .js for the file extension. Okay, so as you may see, now I have a base JS file that is in my JavaScript folder. Now I'm going to go on my CSS folder, and I'm going to create a style sheet. So I'm going to go new file, right? This file, I'm not clicking file, and I'm going to go down to style sheet. But for the people that's in another IDE, just to kind of get an understanding of what I'm saying, if I do new file and I call this file, let's say style.css, right? You will see that it still put that CSS, it still says CSS file, right? Or in my IDE, because it has the ability to pull in style sheet, I could do something like design, and I can just say design.css, right? So it knows that it's a design.css. So right now we're just going to leave the style sheet there. So let's go ahead and remove this one, because we won't be using two style sheet. We only be using one style sheet. All right. Now what we want to do is we want to go to our index. So let's open up our index.html file. And in our index.html file, we will be writing some code. So because your IDE may not created that code template that it did for me, I'm going to help you write this code. So we're going to use create HTML elements here. Okay, so the first element that we'll be creating is the doc type. Okay, the doc type, so we can tell the web browser what type of document this is. So we're going to use an angle bracket. So angle bracket left, angle bracket right. Okay, angle bracket left, angle bracket right. We're going to go inside of angle bracket, and we're going to put an exclamation mark, and in caps we're going to put doc type. Okay, and then in lowercase we're going to do HTML. So now we know that this is a doc type HTML. Now we're going to create the elements that we need to use on this page. So we need a few elements, right? The browser needs to know what type of elements we're using. So in this case, we're going to be using HTML elements. And so we're going to make a spaces in between that so we can keep this clean. Okay. Now, when you're writing in HTML, you can also make comments. So I'm going to make some comments here, and this is how you make a comment. Okay, so just follow along with me, right? So this is the comment to explain the following is the header section. The header section, or the head section, is the head section of HTML. Okay, and then I'm going to do dash dash and close the angle bracket. All right, so now this comment, when you see comments like this in an HTML document, it means that the web browser compiler will just go right over that. It won't read that into your website, right? That is for your personal use, so you understand what you're writing. So now we said we're going to do the head section, so let's go ahead and do the head section. So we're going to open up a head element, and in that head element we're going to put the site title element. Okay, so we're going to call it the site title element. So with any element, you need to you're going to have an open angle bracket, and you have to close the angle bracket with this slash right here. Okay, so that's what closes. So let's give this this site, or this page, a better name. This page, we're going to call it our first website. Okay, so we're gonna call it our first website, because this is very, very basic. Okay, our first website, because there's some people that this is going to be their first website, so we'll just go with that. Okay, now we want to do is to link our two other files to our page. We need to link these two other files to our page. So let's go ahead and link those two files to our page. So one, we need to then create something called a link. Okay, so in this link, we need to make sure that we spell it correctly, because that's one thing. And again, as you may see, it says a link, and then it has the end part of this link. Now in this link, let's go ahead and add some more things in this link, right? We're going to add in the link, in the angle bracket, not after the angle bracket, we're going to add some more stuff, okay? When you see it's grayed out like this, it means that you do not need to add the closing one like that. So you can remove that right there. If it's grayed out, right? Sometimes you just may know this. Your IDE may not tell you this, but as a developer over time, you will figure out which ones you need and which one you don't need, okay? So because I know I don't need that, I deleted that. Now we need to create a reference. We need to create a reference, okay? But before we create a reference, let's tell the web browser what type of link this. So we're gonna say this is rel, and this is going to be a style sheet. So this link is a style sheet. Now we're going to move on and we're going to add the type. The type of style sheet it is going to be a text/CSS, right? Which means that we're going to be using CSS language in this style sheet, so it knows how to read that correctly. The next thing we need to do is tell it where that style sheet is. So we're going to use an H reference to do so. And this is going to be in, right? It's going to be in the CSS folder / and the name of the file, which is style.css. So that's just the path to the CSS file, okay? Now let's add the JavaScript file. We're going to do another link. And this time, let's delete this because my IDE do code completion. So what I want to do here is I just want to add a link, and I just want to add a source for this link. And this source, I'm sorry about that, we're not doing another link right here because we're just going to pull in our Bootstrap stuff, but we're going to get to that later. Let's go ahead and pull in our JavaScript. So in the JavaScript, it's a script, right? So it's called JavaScript, so we have to pull that in with a script element. So with a script element, you just again, angle bracket, script, okay, script. And in that script, you're going to tell it what type it is, and then you will tell it where it's located. And where it's located in this case will be using the src, which is a source, right? So the src, and this is going to equal to the JavaScript folder, so JS, which is my name of my folder, / base.js. So now that will pull in my base.js. And this one will definitely need to have an ending script tag, because I can actually write scripts in between that if I wanted to, but no, I just wanted to pull in. So I actually can write more scripts in here if I wanted to, if you are writing JavaScript code. However, when we're putting these in the head tag, it normally means that we're pulling in some sort of a JavaScript file from somewhere else. So now that we have our JavaScript file in here, now we're going to close out the head tag, which we did right here, and then we're going to open up the body tag, okay? So the body tag is where we are telling the web browser, this is the body. This is what I want you to show me on the screen, okay? So what do I want it to show me on the screen? I want it to show me hello world on the screen, right? So in this case, if I just put hello world, this will actually make me create a pretty good, easy-going website that's called hello world. So let's see if we can get a quick hello world here. So what I'm going to do is, let me get this over here. My Mac sometimes don't like when I pull stuff over, so let me minimize the screen. So that's the reason why it's complaining. All right, let's go ahead and pull over a new tab in here, and let's open up the hello world. Okay, so we have to then get this in this file folder, which is then in here, right? Documents, index.html. But in my computer, right, I could do it either two ways. One, I could go back in here and then I could double click this. And if I double click this, I could actually double click, not double click is not working. So let's right click and open with, right? Open with Google Chrome or your other, or whatever browser you want to use. And as you may see, when we did that, it says our first website. So when I did double click, it did open that. It was just behind. So as you may see, now we have our hello world folder website here, right? So, but this is not really that exciting. But guess what? You have created your first hello world website, okay? Your first hello world website. So now let's get back to the code, okay? What can we do with this code? Well, we talked about Postman in our earlier video and using that to connect to a website, right? So what we wanted to do is to just make sure that we are ready for that in our next class. But to do that, we want to speed the process up a little bit, and that's the reason why you're going to want to be at my next class. So now we have a hello world. We want to create something to talk with OpenAI. So let's just structure something really, really quickly so we can talk with OpenAI, okay? So what I want to do in my body is I'm going to create a div, okay? And in that div, I'm going to create a form, okay? I'm going to create a form. So now we have a div, and now we're creating a form. So I'm talking this out in just natural language, right? I'm creating a div, which is a divider, and then now I'm creating a form, and I'm just using the elements here, right? So div for the divider, and then form. So you can talk this out just like this. Now I want to create some dividers again, because I feel like dividers will keep my code really, really clean, okay? I'm going to put a class in here, and I'm going to call this class form group, okay? I'm going to call this class form group, okay? So classes are basically exactly what it is. It's a class. So as a class has multiple things inside of it, and in this case, we're going to be using form group. So anywhere form group is located, it will take on, everything that happens in that class, okay? So inside of that class form group, we want to then add a label, okay? We want to add a label. And in that label, we want to add a for in there, okay? For. So this label, what is this label for? So this label is for, and we're going to say this label is for some text area that we may use, okay? Some text area that we may use, because we probably let's create a mini ChatGPT, okay? So this for will be for our text area for our mini ChatGPT. So I'm going to call it response text area, right? Response text area. Why am I calling it response text area? Well, because this is where my response is going to come back from ChatGPT. So in between the label, I will write the word response, so that way I can have that above my my text area when we do create that. So let's go ahead and create the text area as well. And so we can get rid of that red mark here, because it doesn't know where that text area is. So now we're going to call it an ID of response text. So we're going to give it an ID to make this text area has an ID. Like you have a social security, this has an ID. Like you have some form of government document that has an ID number, this is the ID for this text area, response text. So anytime I reference response text, it will know that I'm talking to this text area. In this text area also, we're going to give it a class for any text area, and we're going to call this class form control, okay? Form control. Okay, so this is, again, will get me to use these things in my CSS file when we do our CSS class, okay? And also it will help me to use some of these things in my JavaScript class when we do our JavaScript. So again, let's move forward with this real quick. Now, what we want to do is we probably want to add some rows to it. So let's add some rows to it. So let's add rows, and let's make it a row of 3, okay? And again, you can read up what all of these mean in your time off, and make sure that you're up to date. It's a lot of stuff that you will cover, right? We don't want to write in this text area because we want this to come back from the OpenAI server with the information. So we don't want anyone to be able to type in this. So we're going to just write the word disabled here so that no one could write in this at all. Okay, so now that this is disabled and no one could write in it, then let's go ahead and close the text area. So let's close the text area. So again, angle bracket / text area, right? So now that is closed. Now let's move on to the next thing. The next thing is let's close out the div for this form group. So we're going to close the div for this form group, okay? So now what we have here is we have a label, which is a response text area, and it says invalid ID reference, okay? So that's telling me that we still need to add something here to make sure that this is good. So ID should have been response text area to match this, okay? Or we can take this ID and put up here, but we're gonna change this to response text area to make sure that we fix that error, okay? So let's fix that error. All right, so that error is now fixed. Let's move on to the next step. The next step now is to then add, all right? The next step is now to add another div, okay, another div. So now we're gonna add another div, and in this div we're gonna close this div out here. So now this div is closed out with this one. Since we had an extra one, I'm just going to use this one. If you didn't have an extra one like I did, just add an extra div. That way we have no errors, okay? So now we have a div. Inside of that div, we need to create another label, okay? So this label now will be for our requests, okay? This will be all for our requests, okay? So we're going to be sending a request. So this one is for our request, and we're going to then say enter your prompt, right? Because that's what we're going to be doing. Boom, enter your prompt. Now we need to give them an area to enter their prompt. So this time we're going to use an input field to do that. So input, right? The type is going to be text. The ID needs to match the for label. So we will just call it request. And then the class will be form control, right? So we already did that earlier. So we just call that class form control. And let's go ahead and put a placeholder as well. So whenever anyone wants to know what to do, we can just tell them here, enter your prompt. Boom, here, right? So we tell them to enter their prompt there. So let's go ahead, fix that up real quick, and let's close this input box. With input box as well, you may see that it's not asking me to put a closing input, right? It's because now we don't need that. The browsers are, way more smarter now. We don't need to put an ending input because we're not actually typing anything in between the elements. Now, if we're typing things in between the elements, then we need to also have a closing tag, okay? But since we're not writing anything in between the elements, we don't need to have a closing tag. So let's go down. So now we have this div, closing div, this div, closing div. Now let's create the final thing. What do we need to do when someone enters something? We need to send that somewhere, right? We need to send that request somewhere. So let's create a button. Okay, let's create a button, and in this button we're going to give the button a type, and the type is going to be submit. Okay, the type is going to be submit, and then the class is going to be button. All right, button, and we're going to call this button primary, right? And then we are also going to add one more thing to this button, which is a custom name called button, or my button, better yet. I'm gonna call this one my button. So this give me access to my button when it's time for me to write some CSS. So I know you keep hearing the word write some CSS, write some CSS. You have to come back to the next class to see exactly what that means, okay? Now, in this submit button, I need to be able to submit. So to submit, I need some function. What am I submitting, okay? So what I'm going to do is call something on click. So when I click that button, what do I want it to do? So I'm going to say on click, right? I want this to do something. I want it to send the message that I wrote or my prompt to OpenAI, right? So I could call it send message or send prompt. It doesn't matter what you want to call it. You can call your button whatever you want to call, right? And then I'm going to have my submit word in between that. So my button actually say the word submit, and then where I'm going to have the form close right there. So I'm done. All right, guys, this is done. So let's see what this looks like. Let's see what this looks like. So let's open up back our browser. So for anyone, file save. If you need to save, I don't need to save because with PHP Storm, it saves for me, okay? So this is going to say send prompt. It's probably going to give me some errors because I'm calling for the send prompt function, which is not in my JavaScript as yet. So, but I want to open this just to kind of see what it is, all right? Let's see what it is. So again, we're going to pull back this over and let's refresh. Oh, look at that. We have a text area right here that we can type in, okay? See, that text area we can type in. But we have a prompt and we can type into this prompt. But this is not really looking too good now, right? It's not really looking good. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to getbootstrap.com, right? So getbootstrap.com. And we're going to have them assist us a little bit. So we're going to go to getbootstrap.com. We're going to go to their docs. And in their docs, it says that we can pull this stuff in. We create a new index.html file, which we did already. And now we can go see what they have in their head. Oh, look at this. They have something called meta. Okay, so let's steal this from them. So we're going to copy. and we're gonna steal this from them. We already have our own title, so we don't need their title. So let's go ahead and we're gonna steal what they have in here. So let's add this in our head as well. Let's go back over to their website again. What else they have? Oh, they have a link here, and this link is completely different from what we have in our link, right? Their href is different, so let's steal their link as well. So let's copy this, and let's go back into our code, and let's paste this into our code as well, because we want to steal their link as well. Okay, so now we steal their link. Now let's go back to their code and see what else they have in there. Okay, so now they have a body and they have hello world, but we already did hello world. We don't want hello world anymore, but they have this script source in there, so we want to steal their script source as well. So let's go ahead and copy that, and let's paste that into our website as well. So I'm going back to my IDE, and I'm going to then go ahead and paste that exactly where they had theirs, which was right above their closing body tag. So I'm gonna hit paste. Okay, so now we have that. Ooh, look at that. Now we have a lot of code. Now our website looks real fancy. Our website looks real fancy. So now let's open our website again. So mine's is saved right now, guys. So you'll have to save yours. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up Google Chrome. Go back to my website here and let's refresh. Oh, look at that. It just styled mine. It gave me a little bit of look. So mine's look a little bit better now. But I mean, you know, as we go into our next class, we will start styling that. But before we style that, you know, let's add something else to this. Let's go ahead and let's add a nav bar to it. Okay, let's add a nav bar. So we're gonna go back to their website now that we could use their components. Let's go down to their components and let's find their nav bar. So components, and let's scroll down to nav bar. Okay, boom, we got nav bar here. Let's scroll down and see what nav bar they have. So they have this type of nav bar, so you can steal this text to have that kind of nav bar. They have this kind of nav bar, which doesn't really have anything in there, so we can add this kind of nav bar. Let's see what else nav bar they have. They have this one here. They have this one here. They have this one with the search bar. They have just one with the username, one, the main button, smaller button. Okay, so I don't like these nav bars, so let me go back up to the one that I like. So I like this one right here, nav bar, home, features, pricing, link, right? So let me steal this one. So I'm going to go from the closing nav, and I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top nav, or you guys just click this copy to clipboard button right here, and that will copy to your clipboard, and we'll go back to our code. So normally we know that a nav bar is normally on the top of the page. So the top of the page in this case would be in the top of the body, right? So we'll just put that above the code that we write. So let's go up here and let's put some comments here. This is the nav bar from Get Bootstrap, right? So Get Bootstrap, so they know that we stole this from Get Bootstrap. All right, and then we're gonna paste this here. Boom, paste this here. All right, now once we paste that, it has an end nav. We're gonna put some code in here to keep our code clean as well. So we're gonna do, this is the code I wrote, because you wrote this code, so you should feel confident and happy about the code that you wrote, right? So look at this. So now we know that this was a nav bar we stole from them, and this is a code you wrote. So let's go ahead and go back really quickly in our web browser, and let's see what this looks like. So in our web browser, if I refresh, oh, look at that. Now I have a nice nav bar with a home link, features link, pricing, and we are even hidden some more numbers right here. This thing is looking good. This thing is looking good. I like this right now. All right, so now let's go ahead and add quickly, really quickly, just to get us ready for the next class. Okay, for the next class we are going to be doing JavaScript. So what I want to do is just add some JavaScript. This is just extra, guys. You know, we covered this in our live class, and if you were at our live class, you'd have seen this subset of code. Okay, so we're gonna set this up because we're gonna probably be speedballing and moving faster into the rest of the courses. Our last class was extremely long, and we want to make sure that these courses going forward are very quick, precise, and you're getting what you need out of it. Okay, what you need out of it. So now let's go ahead, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be opening up our base.js file. So let's open up our base.js file. And our base.js file, I'm going to tell you to just do one thing, right? We're going to set up. So this is how you do a link in JavaScript // and then we're going to set up API parameters. Okay, so API parameters. All right, so I wanted to set up my API parameters. All right, let me make sure that I'm fixing my words here. Parameters. All right, too much letters. All right, so now I have my API parameters. We're gonna do a const variable. So const means that it's const, right? And then that is going to be for the API key. You guys should have your API key from OpenAI, okay? So if you have your API key from OpenAI, you go ahead and you paste your API key in here. So paste your API key here, right? You should paste your own API key right there. Next, we want to create a function. Okay, what is a function? The function is to send the prompt, right? Send the prompt, okay? Why am I saying send the prompt? Remember, in our index.html file, we have this send prompt. So now when we click on click, it will call this function right here, which is sending the prompt. So what is the prompt? Well, the prompt is the URL, right? So let's create a const URL, okay? Const URL. So what URL do we want to hit? The URL is the URL endpoint to OpenAI, because we're creating that ChatGPT type of look right now, right? So now what that will look like is that we will need to send the prompt. To send the prompt, we need to fetch, okay? We need to fetch, okay? In JavaScript, we use a fetch. So we're going to use a fetch function to fetch the information. So see, when we use a fetch function, it says URL, and then it has these brackets right here, okay? So what is a URL? Well, the URL that we have, right, when we do URL, it will pull this URL in. So whatever you name your URL up here, go ahead and type URL right there, which is the name of your URL. So if your URL is OpenAI URL, then you want to add OpenAI URL right here. Okay, so now you have the OpenAI URL right here. You want to then go ahead and start adding some code to this thing real quick, okay? This code real quick. So we're going to do body, okay, body, and then we're going to do, the body is going to be a JSON string. So we're going to do JSON, and we're going to use the word stringify to let it know that we're going to be using JSON strings, right? Now, when we do that, we have to then set this up. So now the first thing we want to do is what model in the OpenAI system we want to hit. So we're going to write the word model here. And in this model, we're going to add that we want to hit a model. So let's use the latest model they have, which is GPT 3.5 Turbo. So we're going to do GPT 3.5. So GPT dash 3.5. And the last thing is going to be is dash turbo, I believe. Okay, GPT 3.5 dash turbo. Okay, so I'm trying to remember all of this, and I will show you exactly where to go to make sure that you have this stuff ready to go. So so GPT turbo. Boom. So now I have GPT Turbo. Let's go ahead and add the next structure to it. But before we do that, let's just see, where am I getting this information, right? I know I have this information. You're probably saying, Harain, where are you getting this information? How do you know that this is what you should be doing? Well, guess what? I've been messing around with this thing for a while, so I kind of know exactly what I need to be doing. So what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to pull this thing back up, and we're going to go over to platform.openai. Platform.openai. You shouldn't be asking me that question, because if you watch my previous classes, you should know where this is at, right? So in our platform.ai, we're going to go to our API reference. We're going to go to completions, or we're going to go to chat actually, and we're going to do create a chat completion. And it says post to HTTPS. So let's copy this while we are here, all right? Let's copy this while we are here. So when we get off this page, we will have this link. So we're going to copy and hold this. And you see it says post HTTPS to there, right? So this is going to be a post, okay? So it says model. The model, right, that we're going to be using is over here. So model GPT 3.5 dash turbo. So we have that. Now we're going to have this, add this message in here. We're going to have to add this message in here. So let's go ahead and add the message in here, okay? So we're going to do comma, and let's go and add messages. And then we're going to go ahead and put colon. All right, and this message comes in an array. To write an array in JavaScript, you're going to use bracket, bracket. Okay, so regular brackets, not angle bracket, bracket. Okay, so I'm going to open this bracket, and in this bracket we need to do two things. Okay, we need to do things. We need to have an angle bracket, and in that angle bracket we need to tell it what is it that we will be using. Okay, so in this case we're going to be doing role, and the role that I wanted to take on is a user role because I'm the user, right? And then in that user role, I want to then add the content that I'm sending. And the content that I'm sending is this, right? The content that I'm sending is this. We're going to get the content from the input box that we had. So to get the content, we will say the document, which is the HTML document, right? Let's get the element by ID. Okay, what was the element by ID? Well, let's go back there. Looks for the input on line 59. It says input, the ID was request. So we're going to go back in our base and we're going to add the request ID. So now I'm going to put that in single quote. I'm going to call it request. Okay, so now it knows that I want the request ID, and I'm going to close that out with dot value. Again, you're going to close it out with dot value. So now we have our role and our user, right? So you can make this even more cleaner by doing it like this. That way you have it nice and clean. Boom. So now we have a role, user, and our content is document get element by ID, and we send that to our request request in our we're getting that from our request element here, which is our input form, which we call request by the ID, and we're pulling that ID in to our JavaScript value. Right now, OpenAI has a little bit more that we need to add to this, and we can either add them or not, but let's quickly add them just because we're here already. The next thing we want to do is the temperature. So temperature, and we can add whatever we want for the temperature. At this point we're going to do 0.3 just because that's what I have my values that I like to use. And then let's do max tokens, and let's do like I don't know, 1,000 max tokens. Okay, so that's what I'm going to use for mine. So now we have that in there. You guys will have to read up on the documentation to get a little bit of idea of why I'm doing this and what are these things. This is not what this class is about. That's in my advanced class, which I will teach in another series, but you guys would have to definitely go ahead and get that series, which is a paid series. Okay, so now we have to tell this fetch what is it that we're fetching and what type of fetch is this. Remember when we were there, we saw the word post. So we're going to have to use a method here, and the method is going to be a post method. So method post. You can use single quotes or double quotes. It doesn't really matter. Again, it's going to be post. Okay, so we're going to have a post method, comma, and then we're going to go to the next line and we're going to add the headers, right? So whoever was in my my other class will see that we talked about headers and what we put in the headers. Okay, so we're going to put the same thing that we put in our headers when we did our Postman class. So there we're going to do what? The content type, right? So in our headers we had content type, and the content type was application JSON. The next line, we're going to pull our bearer token into our header as well this time. So we're going to call this authorization. Remember that? Authorization. And we're going to do bearer $ API key, or you can do it this way. Bearer, right? Bearer. So again, this is, you see when you see it like this, you see how I have a single quotes right here. So when you do it like this, that's what he was doing. So he was making this not known. So because of that, you got to remove that if you're writing your own single quote, right? And you got to then concatenate it. So hit plus and then add your API key. So this is going to make bearer space API key, which is what we want. And it will pull this API key into it. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to finish out this text real quick. We just need to make sure that we're securing the information, having some catch brackets, and what we're going to be doing the response if the response is incorrect. So we're going to say, hey, then this is what we want you to do. Then we want you to do something with the response, and the response that you come back with is going to be a response.json, right? But what I want to do is take that out because I want to put an if clause around that, because I want to say if response, right? So I'm going to put two brackets here, if response, right? What I want you to do is then response, then what I want to do is then tell it that I wanted to do something, okay? I wanted to do something. First, I wanted to log the response to my console. That's the first thing I want to do. I wanted to log it to the browser console. The next thing that I want to do is I want to check to make sure that response is what I need it to be, okay? What I need it to be. So if the response is okay, then do me a favor and do something for me. What do I want you to do for me? Well, now I want your response to check to make sure that it has a JSON object in there, okay? And if it has a JSON object in there, then I want you to take the JSON object or the data, right? The JSON object or the data. So you could write whatever you want in here. I'm just going to leave the word data here, and I want you to print that out and do something. So now what do I want you to print out or do it with? Well, first of all, I want you to log that data for me as well. So go ahead and log that data to the console so I can know that that data is in the console. Next, I want you to console, and I want you to log one more thing for me. I want you to log the data choices, right, that came back from OpenAI, and that also has messages in there, not text. It has message in there, and I want to see what the message content is, okay? So you would have to read the JSON to see the stuff. We will cover that in our next class, okay? We'll cover that in our next class. This class is not for that. We're just rebuilding what we did in our live class so you guys could be ready for the next class, okay? So now we have console.log, data.choices, content. In our next class, we'll be getting the actual information and putting that into our text area. Right now, what we need to do is go ahead and start closing out some of these things. So let's clean this code up a little bit. Let's close this out. And there we go. So now we have this. So if you have this code, you should be good. If you have this code, you should be good. So now let's go back to our basic HTML page, or my first HTML page, which is right here, and refresh. When we refresh, you will see now we have a pretty good looking website here, and this website is perfect, right? This website is perfect. So now in our next class, we will cover how to actually connect that using our API key, getting that stuff in here so we can actually type here, boom, type whatever we want, submit that, and then get the response in here like in ChatGPT.